The United States of America is a car-dependent nation. This isn't up to debate. This is an established truth about living in the U.S. Most city planning since the middle of the 20th century heavily encouraged using personal vehicles for transport, making it, in some cases, basically required, think cities like Houston, Phoenix, and LA. Simultaneously, the view of public transportation as a dirty, outdated, grimy, dangerous alternative has become a self-feeding loop in which negative opinions of transit systems discourage their use. Thankfully, in the 21st century, many have renewed the ideas of urbanism, and public transportation is making a comeback in some cities. This has included your usual bus transport, BRTs, light rail, streetcars, metro systems, and more. One of these transportation methods, though, holds a significant edge over others when it comes to their potential scale: trains. There are a few reasons why trains have more potential than other systems, and a lot of it has to do with the past. Of course, in the early 20th century, the United States has an absolutely gargantuan system of different rail lines, which at the time provided service for not only freight, but reliable passenger service to communities everywhere. Nowadays, these services are limited to networks like Amtrak, Brightline, or commuter lines like SEPTA and NJ Transit. This means that communities in densely populated areas, mostly in the Northeast, have a fair level of service, and other locations exist sparsely throughout the country that also enjoy the benefits of passenger rail. However, what I find to be very unfair is how the other communities that aren't in a dense corridor get treated. These areas tend to have either no passenger rail service, a throughway bus connecting to a nearby station, which is a pitiful option, or are served by lines that receive little care or attention. The good news for these communities is that an extremely sizable portion of them still have active rail lines right through the heart of town, meaning that, theoretically, the infrastructure exists to run passenger trains to service these places. Of course, there's a lot more that goes into a passenger rail service, such as the stations, signaling, complex geography, dispatching, funding, track standards, and the list goes on. These are all problems that can be solved by putting the proper investment into the system and getting the work done. It existed before, I promise you it can exist again now. One state I love to focus on in regards to the theoretical restoration of passenger rail is my home state of Wisconsin. Wisconsin as a state has a few things going for it in terms of passenger rail. The state is currently served by Amtrak's Hiawatha between Milwaukee and Chicago, and the Empire Builder from the latter out to Seattle and Portland. Further, there are plans to add trains on the Empire Builder's route between Chicago and the Twin Cities, as well as adding frequency to the Hiawatha and extending certain runs of this route to major destinations like Madison and the Fox River Valley. The state is also technically served by Chicago's Metra in the city of Kenosha. Keep this in mind, we'll come back to it later. Still, I find the passenger rail offerings in Wisconsin, both existing and proposed, to be inadequate, as it leaves out a sizable portion of communities in the central and northern portions of the state. Cities such as Marshfield, Wausau, Merrill, Waupaca, Shawano, Rhinelander, and my hometown of Stevens Point are entirely left out of the passenger rail network, apart from a few throughway buses. While these communities certainly aren't the largest, the people in them still deserve to be able to commute via means other than car, since air travel here is also very limited. I'd like to offer the example of my hometown, Stevens Point. The town is located along the Wisconsin River, a major waterway in the state, and the population here is roughly 26,000 in the city proper, with a couple of suburbs in the area, as well as being geographically close to other cities like Marshfield and Wausau. Stevens Point sits on the Canadian National's main line from Canada to Chicago on the former Wisconsin Central's Superior subdivision. This is a very active line that moves a lot of freight on a daily basis. The old depot building still even stands, being used as offices for Canadian National. Multiple stations actually existed in Stevens Point once upon a time, with a station downtown also being served by the Green Bay and Western, as well as a station in nearby Plover. Majorly in Stevens Point, there is the University of Wisconsin-Stevens Point, a school which I grew up mere blocks from and actually attended for my first year of college. You'll note that Stevens Point has no passenger service, while the next example, Carbondale, Illinois, is served by multiple trains daily in each direction. Now you may find yourself wondering why exactly my new example now is a town in southern Illinois as opposed to Wisconsin, and I have a few reasons to justify this. First, it serves as a direct comparison for myself personally, as this was the city in which I attended college at SIU after my time at UW-Stevens Point, before again leaving for UW-Madison. More importantly, though, Carbondale is also a city of about 25,000 residents, with other suburbs and important towns nearby. It is located near a major river, being a short drive to the Mississippi River, has a public university with similar enrollment to UWSP, though slightly higher, and the town is also located along a busy Canadian National Line, with this route having its history tied to the Illinois Central. As mentioned, Carbondale has multiple trains daily, with 3 daily departures to Chicago on the Illini, Saluki, and City of New Orleans, an equivalent amount of arrivals on the same trains, as well as 1 arrival and departure daily to New Orleans on the aforementioned historical train. Until recently, there was a 3rd daily Illini and Saluki train, and there also used to be an east-west service, supposedly, which I don't remember the name or destination of. And Carbondale was a major rail hub for the southern Illinois region. On several occasions, I was able to simply catch a train to Chicago or back for about $35 each way for a 5-hour trip, and it was astonishingly easy and convenient. In the Amtrak era, this has never once been a possibility in Stevens Point. While there is a thruway bus, let's be honest, you shouldn't need to take an intercity bus to reach a train station. That's a failure of your system. Because of this, I often find myself thinking about what a passenger rail network in Wisconsin could look like. And by network, I mean network. Here, the lines I see as worth establishing are those highlighted in yellow. This isn't a few lines to the biggest cities, this is a system that connects countless towns, big and small, allowing everyone to commute to nearly any city of their choosing. Lofty ambitions, I know. Call me a dreamer. With this map, many lines may seem close together, and I know firsthand that a lot of them are not even close to being up to passenger standard, and some are even rail-trailed. However, again, this comes back to simply taking the time, spending the money, and making it happen as it once did. A lot of this is not the most straightforward routing due to lines that have long since been torn up or disused. For example, a theoretical Twin Cities to Green Bay route, which is a good route idea genuinely because of the sports rivalries, would likely turn off the Union Pacific at Maryland, take the CN to Wisconsin Rapids, which then heads north to Junction City, then turns onto the Main and continues east to the Appleton area and turns northeast. Even still, this map provides a glimpse at what could be revolutionary for dozens or even hundreds of communities in the area of these lines. Is it lofty? Yes. Is it realistic? Absolutely not. But is it achievable? Without a doubt. Now, let's talk about the possibility of commuter rail in Milwaukee. Currently, Milwaukee has no commuter rail service. For a city of Milwaukee's size, this is shocking and somewhat embarrassing. As it currently stands, there are multiple lines that would be well suited to commuter service with a terminal in downtown somewhere. There's also fantastic opportunity to connect to Chicago's commuter service, Metra, which has its only Wisconsin stop in Kenosha. If these services were to be connected, riders could either interchange between services in Kenosha seamlessly, or even potentially have services running even further, perhaps running express into Chicago on a Milwaukee commuter line and having Metra run express into Milwaukee from Kenosha. This would have the potential to be a line in service with excellent frequency and ridership. Lines could extend out to communities such as Port Washington, Hartford, Oconomowoc, Mukwonago, Burlington, and Kenosha. These communities are all about 30 miles from downtown Milwaukee and could greatly benefit commuters. A line to Burlington would also be within spitting distance of the Antioch Metro stop, so the same idea of expresses and connections could theoretically be applied to create a second corridor which could be just as good for passengers. If these lines sound like they'd be too long to reach further out communities, keep in mind that these lines are all shorter than several Metro lines. Metra's furthest station from Chicago, Harvard, is over 60 miles from downtown, so this is nothing. Although, of course, Milwaukee is a much smaller city than Chicago, so take that with a grain of salt. At one point, Metra was even ready to expand this service to Beloit or Janesville in Wisconsin, or so I was told by an old coworker who used to work for the railroads and has long been an advocate for some of these ideas. You rock, Greg. Now, a bit of a note here. Since I first started writing this script to the time my ADHD-riddled brain decided it was time to actually make it, there's actually been a couple new developments. Firstly, it actually came to my attention that Wisconsin's state legislature and Senate actually made it illegal for Milwaukee to form any sort of regional transit authority, essentially blocking them from establishing commuter rail anytime soon, even if they wanted to. This is, of course, because the state government has, since the start of the 2010s, been heavily controlled by the GOP thanks to incredibly gerrymandered districts. The policies in Wisconsin are typically based on what hurts liberal and leftist cities like Madison and Milwaukee, seemingly out of political gamesmanship. Secondly, there has actually been expressed interest recently in doing almost exactly what I described with connecting to Metra in Kenosha. Recently, the idea has reemerged of a commuter service on this corridor, with trains continuing back to Chicago and vice versa potentially. The latter is also not unfeasible due to the third development, that being the recent announcement by Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker that Metra will be expanding service all the way to Rockford. This is the first significant development with Metra in quite some time, and it's very exciting that this service is going to be added. Though Metra does have a lot of issues, please go watch Alan Fisher. Going back to our original talking points, ideally, of course, the passenger infrastructure would be separated from the freight infrastructure, so whoever runs the passenger lines could own their tracks instead of the freight company, and electrification would be fantastic. But following freight lines through the state is a good step to providing accessible transportation for all Wisconsinites. Many of the state's residents have recently been advocating for the proposed expanded services, so the time is good to strike on transformative ideas regarding transportation and mobility in Badgerland. Americans in every state deserve accessible transport, and Wisconsin is only one example, with this only being one half-baked concept for what could be accomplished. At the end of the day, the fight for advancing urbanist ideas is a long battle which will likely remain uphill for decades, but always remains possible. As long as someone in the world has the vision of change, there are those who will assist with the power to make it reality. Anyways, what are your thoughts on comprehensive passenger rail in Wisconsin or your home region? What do you believe we should be doing to change our transport and our cities? What else should I give my thoughts on? Please let me know below, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the funny little bell. We're close to 100 subscribers, which I want to thank you all for. I hope you enjoyed this different form of content, and I'll see you all next time.